Welcome everyone to today's Trends in PR webinar presented by the PRSA East Central District and ExpertFile. I am Mark Weinstein, and I have the honor this year of serving on the ECD board as its chairman. It's quite an honor to be here today, and Katie Neal, our moderator, will introduce Peter Evans and Rhea Wessel in a moment, the presenters. But let me share a few quick thoughts before we get going. First of all, earlier this month in the ECD newsletter, I communicated just how our district is thriving. Let me quickly point out two ways that we as members can benefit this year. First, thanks to the leadership of Dr. Aggie, we are planning a district-wide week of caring. This will be the week of September 21st. We're developing a communication plan around this initiative, and I'll be sending an email to chapter presidents later this week with more details, so look for that. Next, the East Central District Conference is scheduled for Saturday, September 13th in Columbus, Ohio. And if you want to come the night before, we'll have a great networking event on Friday night. So mark your calendars for September 12th and 13th for the East Central District Conference in Columbus. And finally, I want to thank ExpertFile for its commitment to the East Central District and for developing this informative webinar today. You know, I met Peter at ICON back in 2016 in Indianapolis, and I can say personally and professionally, I have enjoyed it and I've benefited from my time with knowing Peter. It's been a great professional relationship. So that's enough for me. Let me turn the program over to our great moderator, Katie Neal. Katie?
Thank you, Mark. As a leadership coach and longtime communications professional, I am so excited about this program that we have here today. We are going to dive into what's on every communicator's mind, how to stand out when everyone is shouting. Thought leadership has long been a buzzword, but the stakes are higher now. Misinformation abounds, audiences are skeptical, the market is saturated, and attention spans are shorter than ever. We are going to unpack what actually works, and we're lucky to be joined by two powerhouses in this space today. First, I'll introduce you to Rhea Wessel. Rhea is the founder and head of the Institute of Thought Leadership, where she helps companies grow their business by enabling their experts with story smarts. Rhea advises and trains on ideation, messaging, how to find and articulate your best ideas to create new solutions. As a journalist, she wrote thousands of stories for magazines and newspapers, including the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and BBC. As a writer for companies, she's penned and edited thousands more stories across 30 different industries. Wow, we're so lucky to have Rhea here with us today. We are also joined by Peter Evans, CEO and founder of ExpertFile. ExpertFile is the leading expert visibility platform used by global brands and institutions. And with over 2 decades of experience in tech, media, and SaaS, Peter's expertise has been widely recognized, and his work's been featured in publications like Inc. and PR Week. Now, having been an early adopter of ExpertFile myself in a previous role, I am not surprised that its many awards include Best Content Marketing Solution. So Peter's a frequent featured speaker at and sponsor of major comms conferences, including PRSA, so thank you, as well as a consultant and angel investor in a variety of industries. Both Rhea and Peter have spent years helping orgs build credibility, cut through the noise, and scale influence. So we're excited to have them with us here today. And for now, I'm going to turn it over to Peter.
Thanks so much, Katie. Appreciate it very much. I've been given what is arguably a short amount of time today with you. Wanted to talk about this notion of uncertainty that we've got these days and how thought leadership, I think, is becoming more critical than it ever has been. If I was to summarize some of the most important trends that I'm seeing in the market that I think we should really be paying attention to and are foundational to how the future of communications will morph, I think we have to really look at these things like audience attention deficit. We've had essentially a TikTokification of media. And you may have even seen an announcement, I believe it was on Monday this week, of all the platforms to be going into short form video. Substack made an announcement, and it's got a number of Substackers very upset because that was supposed to be one of the last bastions of long form content. Next, I guess Medium will follow suit and others. But what we're seeing is a massive number of platforms trying to look more and sound more like TikTok with the formats that they introduce. So it has been groundbreaking, but it's also meant that we're going with shorter communications and more snackable content. We have to be aware of how it's shaping behavior. We've got a more complex audience journey. OpenAI has opened up a whole new era, I think, for search. One of the things I'll mention is how SEO is becoming AEO. It's basically algorithmic optimization now, bot to bot, where with agentic AI, we're now entering an era where websites will be less valuable as a tool from a UX perspective. And the websites need to be redesigned for how bots will crawl them and how they will interact with other bots to find information that they need. And lastly, we've seen a major erosion of truth and trust. A good example would be the movement from Twitter to X, and whatever side of that you're on, you have to agree that Twitter has been massively transformed under Elon Musk, and some would say for the worse in terms of just what can be posted up there. But we are rife in misinformation, and we've also seen a massive amount of polarization, which we as communicators need to navigate. So amidst all this uncertainty, I go back to something that Jeff Bezos said some time ago on a panel, and I thought it was an interesting comment. He was asked, Jeff, you're the guru and you've had a lot of success in your career. What's going to change over the next 10 years? And instead of answering the question, he said he preferred to focus on what's not going to change in the next 10 years. The second question, in his view, is more important because he wants to focus on durable, foundational things that you can build a business on over time. And I think that's important as well. And that's where I wanted to focus a discussion today. I've been doing marketing now for 30 years. Yes, I'm that old. I know I look a lot better than that. I hope I do. But I've been obsessed with marketing frameworks and models over the past 30 years. I have no regrets with all the time I've invested. But if I was to simplify things down to where you could get it to a grade 8 level, which is where we're supposed to be writing these days as communicators, and make sure your thumbnails look like Mr. Beast's as well. I want to save you some time. And this way that I frame a lot of communications these days, and it's a litmus test, is the whole ACT framework. We're looking for attention. We need to get attention first in order to create curiosity and actually sustain curiosity along a buyer journey all the way through to getting to something called trust. And it's only when trust is established that people buy. And there's the old line, always be closing, always be selling. We're all in the sales game, whether you're working for a PR agency or you're selling ideas to the media, hopefully getting media coverage. It doesn't matter. We're all in the game of trying to sell our ideas. The other foundational aspect of thought leadership that I like to focus on is how neuroscience plays a role in what people pay attention to, what they are curious about, and in the end, what builds trust. The 60-second neuroscience lecture here is that to oversimplify the way that the brain works, my undergrad was psych and cognitive psych, and also worked in psychiatry for 5 years, but that's a longer story. So I've always been fascinated at how the reptilian brain actually brings in information and then hands off to what we call the rational brain, the neocortex. And that neocortex is the smart one that wants to see the pricing again, or wants to see the finer points on the car lease that somebody's about to sign, while the other person is saying, oh, but it's so beautiful and it's all buffed up in the showroom. That's the reptilian brain. It is based on survival. It makes very fast decisions because we are programmed biologically from an instinct, survival, and dominance perspective to react to stimuli in a faster way. So this is actually baked into our brain. All of us have this structure. How we moderate those impulses is all different. And you see ADHD and neurodiversity playing a part in that. But the things that I want you to think about are as follows. Because the reptilian brain craves novelty and has a very short attention span, and it doesn't like to work very hard, we have to really be clever in the ways that we develop attention. But at the same time, when we're looking at things like curiosity and sustaining an engagement, there are 3 major negative triggers that the reptilian brain is looking for all the time. One is, and we've all seen this, is I know a sales pitch is coming. That is a big way to actually scare the reptilian brain. Don't confuse me with too many details because it doesn't like to work hard, the reptilian brain. And don't bore me. All of a sudden, this is just getting really, really boring. And I'm used to TikTok all the time, and you've got a TED Talk coming, and that just might not be my vibe. So at the end of the day, we have to remember that it is the goal as marketers to get handed over to the rational brain. That's when somebody's asking for pricing, when somebody's asking how something works, and they want to get into the finer points and the details. They're rationally reasoning and rationalizing something. We've moved from emotion. But also there's a modularity where we actually switch between the rational and the reptilian brain, where we're actually going back and forth. And I won't get into that in any detail, but I want to just point out that I'm oversimplifying this so that you understand at least how we behave, which creates some predictability around how we connect with the audience. But here's the issue. When you put these two frameworks together, as we're trying to build attention and develop curiosity and trust, these other three impulses that the reptilian brain is working against you. Don't bore me, don't scare me, and don't confuse me. So one of the things that we do is we work with clients from a thought leadership strategy perspective to make sure that the strategy is on point, but we're very focused on the attention side of that equation with search and discovery. And then the user experience is very much modulating how much you can sustain that curiosity. And we do that through storytelling as well, and work with our clients, or in many cases better than we are at storytelling, because they use our platform for that. And then the measurement on the back end, which is a very rational exercise of understanding what was the performance of the content that we put out there that was put into a user experience that had a great storyline, so that we can begin to unpack that. So I just want to close off and give you a couple of things that will, I think, nicely feather into some Q&A that we could expand on later to just get you a bit more activated in the time that we have, to give you some best practices that I'm seeing out there in the market. I've got a couple of golden rules, I think, that are super important from a thought leadership perspective that I'm asked about a lot. And I'm going to name some names here. Jenny Dietrich. I've been a big fan of Jenny Dietrich's Spin Sucks community for many years. I think it's over 100,000. That might be a very dated figure. But what she's done that I think she's nailed, and she got to this first before anybody else could as well, and really stuck her neck out to put together what was previously a more simplistic view of media, to come up with the PESO framework. But I think she's gone farther now to make that more part of a micro-credentialing program. It doesn't compete directly with the APR, but it's, again, from a professional education perspective, a good program from what I've heard. And it's also accredited now through a university. So she's taken the framework farther. The best thought leaders have frameworks. They're putting their stuff into frameworks that are relational, that actually position a lot of the complex information in a more understandable way. I want you to also understand how important relevance is. And I can't think of a better way to be relevant if you're publishing in the moment. Pope Francis died, and I think, if memory serves me correct, Sunday night was when that was announced. Vanderbilt, first thing, had a release out. This is on ExpertFile, breaking news alerts with expert sources. But what's really important here is that Vanderbilt's not just saying, hey, we can talk about this. They're offering up an actual expert in some of their content with detailed biographical profiles. This is super important when you start thinking about what the journalist is looking for. They're looking for vetted sources, and they're looking for brands like Vanderbilt, where they believe that Vanderbilt's got good people on staff. You've got to be more discoverable. When people are looking for information now, they could even be using TikTok as a search engine. And that's a development that we're looking at in a big way right now, as well as agentic AI, and how AI is becoming a way for web information to be far more filtered, and it's far more open. Google's far more proprietary. What we are about to see is a major undoing of Google, and what it remains to be seen whether or not Gemini is going to work for Google. But they are trying to compete with all the other AI search engines, which is what a lot of these companies are doing, is they're indexing other information. So I highly recommend that you start trying out Perplexity, Chat, GPT, and other AI platforms to see how you are coming up personally and as an organization, and how your experts are coming up. And these are just what we would call page zero content that's actually hitting page zero results, specifically in Google when we're doing non-branded topical searches. Next one here is the notion of being visual. If you haven't seen Julius Solaris from Bold Push, I highly recommend you follow him and take a look at how he's building both frameworks, similar to what we saw with the PESO model, but how he's using visual arrays of information with some very bold colors as well. It works because he's actually built a community, a paid community. I don't know if they're all paid, but he's boasting 20,000 people that are subscribed specifically to Bold Push, which is an events industry community. And what I like about this is that he's constantly pushing out valuable content that's super chewy and super visual, whether it's how to plan your event to attract Gen Xers or millennials versus Gen Z and showing the characteristics of what needs to be offered at the event, or whether it's even looking at the events industry and telling you as an event planner what you need in terms of new skills to work in this new environment. And Emory, I love what they're doing in terms of being approachable with content that works for journalists, for donors, for prospective grad students, alumni, people that are going to their website. They realize that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Rather than boring faculty profiles, they're really bringing their experts to life with comprehensive profiles that include a range of multimedia assets, but also approachable content like Q&A, which gives them better search rankings. As we know, Quora and other Q&A platforms are very good at enhancing search results because that is what AI is also looking for. So if you're not thinking about Q&A structures and formats related to your content, give some thought to that. And lastly, I'm going to close off here with the importance of being human. There's a fantastic report by Ogilvy, one of the larger ad agencies in the world, which actually talks to, it's called The Rise of the B2B Influencer. And what I like about this report is that it really pays attention to how internal experts are becoming the new influencers in B2B. We saw the influencer trend in consumer brands, but if you are in a knowledge-based organization, it is now time to start thinking about this in a big way. And what I mean specifically is we've got clients that are launching speakers bureaus like Christiana Care, not just an improvement to their media site, which also won IBC Silver, but the Gold Quill Award was won with us in Christiana Care. This was a wonderful project to see a speaker bureau come out. And this speaker bureau is far more inclusive of their staff. It just is not your typical white coat physicians that are on camera for news. And what Christiana Care has essentially done is shown the diversity of its organization. And what we're seeing here is more speaking that they're getting for webinars and podcasts. And for in-person events, it's boosted their internal culture. And even HR is saying that they're seeing a really nice improvement in out-of-state nurses applying, other things like that, impact that they didn't really project when they laid out the plan for this. So what you need to do is put your people out there and put them on offer and make them more approachable. And you'll be richly rewarded the way Christiana Care has been. Last time I heard they were 400% over target on speaking inquiries because they've gone the extra mile to show people in a better way than most organizations do. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Ray.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you for your thoughts and remarks. I'm Rhea Wessel, happy to be here, and I want to talk to you a bit about writing like a thought leader, because getting your ideas out there means articulating those and finding your ideas. And yeah, that's what I focus on. So let me first begin with actually a quick question. What is a thought leader? I'd love to hear you put your answer in the chat, and we'll look at that in the Q&A time. In the meantime, I'll suggest that a thought leader is someone who is predicting what's happening. They're able to sense something and articulate it before others can articulate it. They are very conceptual and very story driven. And I'm curious to see what you put in the chat as well. And for yourselves as potential thought leaders, in the area of communications and PR. And for the experts you work with in your organizations, there is a trajectory of how you move from being, let's say, an invisible expert to a visible expert. And I think it's really important to think about these steps and maybe take a moment next time you're working with one of your subject matter experts. Consider, what phase are they in? Are they resistant? They're curious, might want to get out there with the ideas, but they're having a little bit of fear of public opinion, right? FOPO. There's so many foes now, but FOPO, right? Public opinion. The second stage, and the experts evolve through this, through practice, through enablement. And of course, some are more natural than others, but I do think that it is a skill that can be learned. So once you're not so resistant, then you're in this stage where you're gaining momentum. You're getting confidence. You've put some articles out there. You've maybe created other types of media and gotten feedback and developing an audience and understanding what that audience needs and how you are coming across to them. And finally, the experts who are really ideating all the time, have too many ideas that they can, more than they can publish, when they're on a roll like that, then I would say you've hit that stride. You're in the place where you can be a much more visible expert. And one of our clients is Harvard alumni entrepreneurs, and we work with the subject matter experts in a 10-week program, helping them move from resistant to confident. And I wouldn't say it always happens within the scope of the program. 10 weeks, it can take longer. I'm now seeing some people really emerge on LinkedIn that I worked with a couple years ago in the program. So that is the trajectory. So next, I'd like to talk about the 3 steps to thought leadership writing. And this is the process of getting the idea out, right? First, you've got to find your thought leadership niche. Then you need to frame your stories. And finally, you're going to flesh it out, your article or your text. And now with AI and many people doing so much AI writing, and you yourselves hopefully using AI, you can almost push a button and get a pretty decent article out of a machine. But if it's not born of your thought leadership niche or of your organization's thought leadership niche, then it's just going to be, a set of facts. So I work with experts in companies and individuals. How do you articulate that niche and then make sure that the stories that you want to tell are born from that niche? So here are 5 types of thought leadership writing. And as a one-off, you're not, even publishing a single book is not going to make you a thought leader. It's your body of work. And ideally, when someone is able to see at the headline level without really digging in and understand the positioning, that then the body of work is actually speaking for you or the firm as well. So if it's too broad and fragmented, that can be confusing to the reader. So these are important formats. And I think the short form first person article is very, very important. Getting an opinion out there. And as Katie was saying, so much AI writing, et cetera, having an opinion and sharing that is super important for the experts in your firm and for yourself. And when you are ready to do that and you're out there, so you need to have what I call the journalistic framing approach. And I actually have bachelor's in journalism, and no one was calling it back then. It was called, go get the story. That's what the editor said. And we learned by doing. And in the writing of my book, I had to kind of reverse engineer my process and figure out how do I know what the story is, right? And you as a comms professional are probably finding the story all the time, but how do you do it, right? It's also very instinctual, but it is possible to help the subject matter experts have a method and a framework for the journalistic story finding. And that's going to help you as a comms professional, because when they come to you with their next article that they would love to see published on your website or through some of your corporate channels, then that article will be much better if they've used a journalistic framing for it. So very important. And once you've got that framing, then you also need to deliver like a journalist. And that means the opposite of academic writing. Like if, show of hands, who is getting articles from their experts that are just like, a PhD thesis? Probably, I'll put it in the chat. This is a common problem, but you need to write with this journalistic approach. And that means things like short sentences and not overloading the stats, etc. Looking quickly at those 3 steps for thought leadership writing, finding your niche. How do you do that? This is what it would look like. Putting together what it is you know. This could be what you study, but it could be what you learned over years of experience and trial and error. Linking that to your passion and purpose, and then also having a unique perspective on that subject matter. Where those 3 interact, that's your thought leadership niche. And I also say it's your story sweet spot. Because if you're writing stories from that spot, then they're going to resonate because it links everything together, what you know and the passion and the unique angle. I'm going to have to stop for a second for a little sip. Excuse me. Starting points for story angles. This is part 2. After finding your thought leadership niche, then there's framing your story. So where do you go out and find stories? We all, even if you have a lot of ideas, usually you get to the point where, well, what should I write about today or this week, right? Well, here are some of the good places to look. And you start to get your own internal processes. If you're reading someone else's material and all of a sudden you're getting agitated, then you learn that's a cue. Here is something that I can potentially take apart. I can, write the rebuttal. This is not just to get me agitated, but this is to actually get me thinking and get me writing. So here are some places to take a look. But all in all, and especially with AI writing, it's coming down to having the most novel thinking, the best ideas. And how do you get that? How do you find those ideas? There are harvesting methods. And some of them are, for instance, free writing, which is something we do in our Harvard alumni program. And I do this with corporate executives. It's not, the C-suite can benefit from free writing. Believe me, I've done it. It's not, and it doesn't have to be long, right? It's actually very therapeutic for many people. So free writing, chartifying, list making, all of these are steps in the process of accessing and articulating your best ideas. And a couple more things to share before closing and moving to Q&A. What is a good idea? All right, so maybe you've done some deep harvesting, you've done some deep access. How do you know if what you found was good? And there's a story behind this figure that is in my book. An expert had asked me to take a look at his website, and he was trying to explain to me what he was doing. And I was looking at the website, listening to him, and still not getting it. And then he finally asked me, like, what, how do you know what a good idea is? And I started listing them all off. I ended up creating a figure out of that. So it's got to be attracting that reptilian brain, as Peter said. So it's got to have that novelty. It does need to be brief, clear, useful, right? And have some sort of, let's say, wow effect, which is closely linked to that novelty. And that, as I mentioned at the beginning, subject matter experts have an ability to articulate what they're feeling perhaps before others do. And I think this is really cool. I mean, don't you have a certain joy or excitement when you say, oh, he or she nailed it? So you've been thinking about something, you've been connecting dots yourself, and then someone has identified it and given it an interesting name, and you're like, that's it, right? And they've even potentially compared the idea to something else to make it more understandable. And finally, I'll share some of the 17 types of thought leadership articles. So once you've harvested those fresh ideas, you got to pack them in a nice story. And there are lots of different ways to tell the story. And I've identified these 17 types, like a reasons why story or a personal impact story. And I think that they offer a good structure for sharing your thinking. And thank you.
Awesome. Well, there is so much to explore based on what the two of you have shared. I've seen at least one question in the Q&A. We will get to that one in just a minute. Ray, I'd like for you to take the first question, if you wouldn't mind. How do you identify the right experts to elevate, and what support do they need to be successful?
Thank you. Yeah. So to identify the right expert to put out there, I think you use your own journalistic instincts, your own story instincts, and approach it like you had to decide that and pitch it to your editor. So you might interview a few of them in the organization and see who's giving you that intrigue ping, who's saying it very succinctly, who's keen to communicate. And so the same way you would choose your sources for an article. And I know many people in comms are former journalists. So if they're convincing you, and that's one way. And then to support them, the second part of your question, Katie, is I do think that you shouldn't leave them alone, right? The writing process is very insular, but you don't have to be completely alone in it. Having colleagues and you as the comms professional to bounce things off, or even a writing clinic in your organization where they can, like you have in a university, swing by the open office hours of the writing clinic and have a journalist look at your text. And let's figure out if this idea has legs or if it's actually something that we've heard 1,000 times before. So I would say that short answer, don't leave them alone in the process of becoming a thought leader, because that's tricky. And they also have a day job.
That's so true. And sometimes you just need like 3 bullet points, right? Like just shoot it off the top of your head and I can help you turn it into something that will be powerful in the media. But there's an education space that takes place there, which I think you were speaking to. Peter, question for you. And this comes from the chat. This is from Bree. She wanted to know, back when you were talking about Google and ChatGPT and all of the other AI search programs that are out there, what prompt would you use in AI in order to look up your company or your page?
First of all, categorically, what you want to do is make sure that you're focused on the right questions by category. So there's things like, I would first want to do things like brand recognition. What are we known for? So company XYZ, what are we known for? What sort of topical associations is AI driving or seeing out there? And remember, the major thing in all this is you could have it all across your website, all across social, and then realize that it's just not getting indexed in the proper way. So there are ways to structurally set up contents that it has a better chance of being indexed. But the other thing I'd look at is very specific experts or executives within your organization and look for how prominent those people are in your prompt. And you can actually even ask ChatGPT or Perplexity for tips on how to set up the proper prompt. And that's actually one of the big hacks that we're finding right now about AI. I think at one point everybody was convinced, oh my God, now we're all going to have to be prompt engineers and I can make a fortune being a prompt engineer. The funny part is that the best prompt engineers really just ask the AI, what would you recommend I ask in order to have a fulsome answer to this? So I think you need to focus more on the structure. So brand recognition, what topical associations are we getting? I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with somebody from Harvard, and Harvard's like, oh, we're known for everything. We're number one. We're the best. And then we asked a different question. What do you want to be known for that you're not known for right now? And they said, oh, yeah, well, that's a bit different. We have an engineering school, but we're kind of overshadowed by a big institution next door called MIT that we kind of get lost in the shuffle there. So there's an important question you have to ask. What are you not being known for that you could be putting a lot of effort and time and money into? Content discovery and extraction, is it finding your blog posts? So what you need to do is put into the prompts, find me, can you locate this for me, this kind of content that's being put out by our agency or by us? What's your brand sentiment? What's our reputation look like? Would I buy from company XYZ? Pretend you're a consumer. Show me some recent reviews of our product. How has this been seen by the analyst community, our most recent thing? And then do it with your competitors. Your competitive benchmarking is important. And if all else fails, go to your agency and ask them about things like schema markup, named entity organization, content structuring, backlink strategies, and all sorts of other technical things. But remember, do not get taken to the cleaners by an agency that is not optimizing you for generative AI as well as SEO, because it's not just about Google anymore. In fact, TikTok is another SEO strategy that we unfortunately, as communicators, need to be aware of as well.
It feels like we may have just identified the topic for our next webinar series. I feel like we could all go really deep in that. We're experimenting and using it, but at various degrees for sure.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat about thought leadership from a speaking perspective. And there was another one that was sort of similar about are there certain opportunities that are better for speakers, podcast guests? So I think, Ray, this might be a good question to start with you on, based on your expertise with lots of different companies, as well as your journalism experience. What kind of advice can you give to our attendees here about, are there certain types of events? Are there certain events that might be good ones to showcase their experience? And are there any specific steps on what people can do to help their experts get there?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're talking about more for the experts in the company, not for the comms professionals and PR professionals?
I think we're talking about the experts.
Yeah. Okay. I think that the trade niche is always very important, and it is much easier to be known for what you know, which is an important definition of thought leadership, if you have a very narrow niche. And so if you're new to a division or an area, ask the experts there. Otherwise, you can research it very nicely now with AI. What are the trade magazines? What are the important conferences? All of that got a lot easier with the AI. But I would take it a step further. So I do teach AI writing to communicators, and we just did a 3-part masterclass on this, and one person was, organizing speaking events. We did some white space research. Okay, so if you've identified the stage on which your expert needs to be seen, then you can ask the AI, what has been talked about in the years before? What is the theme for this year? And then be sure to give the AI a persona, tell it your business intent, and then ask, what is not being talked about that is relevant for this audience, that fits with the theme of this event. And you can really do nice idea research and come up with unique angles that will delight the people who are picking the speakers. And of course, that goes for yourself when planning your internal events as well.
Ray, that's a really good point that you made. I hope everybody keys in on that. Finding the white space is really important. You want to nail the niche and work with those experts that really understand their craft. But often those experts know something about a topic that's not being discovered enough. And the thing about generative AI, and it's powerful in a couple of ways. First of all, it's going to give you some ideas, but it's also going to be more democratic in what it pulls from. Google is wired to other metrics that are somewhat legacy oriented in the way that they assess relevance and how they present search results. I think everybody would agree Google has its own way of doing things. And in fact, with their quality rater guidelines and other things, have been kind of lying to SEO people for many years about how they were indexing content. So it's really important that you let the AI do the work there to identify that, but it'll do a better job than Google will of identifying where that white space is. And I would use multiple engines for that as well. And the other thing I would just, building on what Ray said, is it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. It's horses for courses. Some people might never want to write a blog post for you, but they would be super happy to answer questions and then just get out Otter.ai or some tool to record the conversation with their permission and transcribe it and make sure you've got it correct, and then just start answering Q&A and putting those kind of formats out, which can be much more snackable and approachable. And that can even be done in the drive home, from work. But meet the expert on their terms, and don't always think it has to be the executives or the CEO. You'll end up wearing them out. There's a lot of other people that can contribute.
Well, and so to that point, and if we could maybe keep the answers a little bit short on these, I'd love to get through all the audience questions. We have just a couple more. One of them I think is great, and something that most of us as PR professionals have faced at one point or another. In this case, someone helping a CEO of a healthcare company talking about thought leadership content on LinkedIn specifically, although that could transcend other mediums. There's an opportunity to both, obviously, as a CEO, they're promoting their company and their organization, but there's also an opportunity to be able to position them as a leader. What's the right balance there? How do you strike that chord?
Right?
I think you go heavier on the person, and by default, the organization gets positioned in a warm light. And the reason is that you go more into the person and his or her personality and unique viewpoint is that simply more authentic, and it will be in line with the brand messages overall. And it's more. The Edelman did research on this, or one of the others. When a individual is sharing their opinion, it's just much more believable and trustworthy than when it comes from an official sort of organ. And so I would work to build the profile of your individual executives. And many people will say, "Oh, well, then what if they leave? What if they leave?" It's still an investment that pays off. And in my view, you can't really overinvest. But what you can do is maybe not give enough people a chance, right? So in one organization I'm thinking of, there's one person who's a so-called corporate influencer, and she owns the space, but there are a lot of other people who have things to contribute. I'm not sure that was a short enough answer, but now I'll pass to Peter.
Well, I couldn't have said it better. I think you nailed it. Those are good points. And in the interest of time, we'll keep running through the questions.
Okay.
Let's do this one. What are your thoughts on the pros and cons of having your own owned media and earned media, the intersection of those two? So for example, if you want to create your own podcast, what Kim has asked in the chat is, that's awesome because you own the content, you can do a lot with it, you can help shape it. At the same time, it takes a long time to build up a following. Earned media has sort of this implied third-party credibility. Would love your thoughts on that. Maybe Peter, we'll start with you for this one.
Well, first of all, there's probably a lot of people on the call in attendance that could speak even better than I can to this. But, to keep it relatively simple and short, it so depends on so many factors, because you have to consider the quality and just the relevance of that content. So it's really important when you're thinking about that mix of owned and earned, that there are certain factors around earned that you need to understand, that earned value is not what it was before. And in fact, some people are worried about how much of their earned media coverage is even being indexed now that it sits behind a paywall, or it's being, told to do not follow or do not crawl for search engines. So that is a problem. And the one thing I would say, a major message for everybody, is that own content is king. Joe Paluzzi has been talking about this for years. And if it's revelational to you, you need to read more about it. But there needs to be strong investments made in own content these days, because it's all you control. You're on rented land, and the algorithm can change. We've seen massive traffic declines recently from both creators and companies that aren't doing this properly and aren't getting the balance right. It depends. It depends on quality, whether you're B2B or consumer, whether you've got an influencer strategy in there to amplify, and how much paid you do. There's so many factors. There is no short answer to that question, unfortunately, Katie.
Ray, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
All good.
Okay. Well, let's do this. I would love for each of you, Peter and Ray, to give sort of a final thought. Peter, let's start with you. If there's something you want people attending here today to take away, hit that home run.
Yeah, I would just have a message for communicators. I find people, when we looked at AI coming out and how it was getting adopted by our clients, I don't even have this now. I should probably brought this slide, but it was kind of a spectrum of all the way from great delight and I'm going to try it and I'm going to embrace it, all the way to I'm going to try to block it and tell people that we need a policy not to use it. And then other people that just wanted it all to go away. The ostrich sort of sticks their head in the sand and hopes that when they pop out, things are better. It's not going to happen. And it's not coming for you. It's not, as Kara Swisher likes to say, it's not going to take your job, AI, but somebody who knows AI will. And I think we need to take that approach to all the different skills that we need as PR professionals. You got to get out, you got to read as many books as you can. You've got to attend webinars. And if you can't, get an AI agent to do it for you and summarize it. If you don't know how to do that, Google it or AI it. But be a seeker of knowledge, and do not think for a second that the boundaries of your role stop with your title, whether you're a chief communications officer or you're a head of media relations, or you're just a digital guy that does the front page of the website. I met somebody recently that did the front page for Audi, and that's all they did in a big agency. I would hope that, you would think broader than that and understand that collaboration is winning the race. The clients that we have that are doing the best work, and I think getting the best results, are thinking out of the box, and they're going beyond their boundaries and pulling those skills in. You have to operate as a skills-based organization. So it's not about rigid job descriptions anymore. It's about configuring your personal talent and joining it with other people in the organization to run exciting projects. And don't settle for the budget that they're giving you, for the resources they're giving you, but at the same time, bring a really, really strong business case to the table. You owe it to executives before they give you the money. So, it's a good message for this economy as well.
It sure is. Ray?
Thank you, Peter. I would top that up and say that skills are, really what it comes down to now, and skill up outside of your domain and offer training as much as you can, and require your team to learn. It's the best way to deal with the uncertain economy, to deal with the impact of technologies that we don't know, is be ahead of the curve in what you know. And there are also training organizations that have like all you can eat type of a buffet menu, so you can really binge on that. And I think that's the best way to actually build team morale and to be ready for what we don't know. And that kind of takes me back to what the slide that Peter opened with Jeff Bezos. You know, what's going to stay the same? Well, I think that thought leadership is going to stay the same in the sense that it's going to stay important. And it's going to become more important because of all of the noise, right? And thought leadership is about trust. It's about building trust. So who can you trust? Who can you find, and how can you trust them? And that will stay the same. And if you're investing for your organization in that way, but also in the skills for yourself and for your team that are going to support thought leadership, then I think that's the best path that you can be on.
Nice.
Amazing.
Peter and Ray, wow, what a great presentation. Thank you for leading us through an insightful conversation on thought leadership. Your presentation today is timely, and I believe all of us can come away from this, both personally and professionally, able to take information that will help us going forward. 2 points specifically that resonated with me today would be getting my audience to act through attention, curiosity, and trust. Oh, trust is so important. And then writing like a thought leader. Love those thoughts, Peter and Ray. Thank you. Katie, thank you for moderating the session and for keeping us on track. Well done. It's great to be with you again. And a final housekeeping item. Everyone who registered for today's event will receive a copy of the slides as well as a link to today's presentation. So you can watch for that in your inbox, and you can share that with a colleague or a friend or however you want to use it. So share this information with whoever you want to share it with. And let me close by letting you know that both Peter Evans and Katie Neal will be two of our speakers at the East Central District Conference in September. So if you enjoyed today's presentation with Peter and Ray, be sure to register for the conference. I'm sure you'll be thankful you did. Thanks for attending today, everyone. Have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.